For sure.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Evan Stankovic, adult programming librarian at the Northside Library, and on behalf of Jay Morrell and Cville Pride, we welcome you to this evening's hybrid Pride event and author talk with Charley Burton. Whether you're here with us in person or watching remotely via Zoom, we thank you for celebrating Pride with us, and also encourage you to keep checking the Jay Morrell website and the Cville Pride website for upcoming programs and events. This event and all Jay Morrell events may be possible by the incredible and generous support of the Friends of the Library and organizations such as Cville Pride. This event is also being recorded for inclusion on the Jay Morrell YouTube channel. So if you'd like to rewatch or know someone who couldn't attend this evening's program, barring any technical issues, which there may be a few since I was getting used to the hybrid program, we hope to have this recording posted within the next couple of days. With that said, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you our very special guest this evening, who is certainly no stranger to the Northside Library. Charley Burton is the Trans Community Outreach Coordinator at Cville Pride and serves on the board of PFLAG of the Blue Ridge. Charley is also the founding board member and the National Program Director of Black Trans Men Incorporated. Awarded the prestigious Outstanding Virginian Award by Equality Virginia and the Community Root Award by Black Pride RVA, Charley Burton is an activist, a mentor, and an inspiration. On a personal note, I'd like to especially thank Charley for partnering so many times with the library. We've done a lot of incredible events. Most notably, we were discussing this before we started the program with Gloria and Holland, the legendary trans activist who sadly passed away a couple of weeks ago. That interview program is actually available on the Jay Morrell YouTube channel. I encourage you to watch it. Very special. I'm so grateful that when I learned that Charley was working on a memoir and that he would consider sharing this work of love with the community here at the Northside Library. It's an honor. And for anyone curious, copies of Charley's memoir are available for purchase after this program, so please pick up a copy. With that said, I'd now like to turn things over to Charley Burton.
I want to let you guys know I've spoken in a lot of meetings in recovery, and some this is the most nervous that I've ever been.
You got this.
I got it. So, first, I want to say the reason why I wanted to do my very first author talk with the library. So I lived out 29 South in a little town called North Garden. I'm still there now. I love North Garden. And we used to talk about going to town. So when we would go to town on Saturdays to our grocery shop, there were some Saturdays that my mother and sister would drop me off at the Gordon Avenue Library. So I would walk up those those big brick steps and go over to the children's section, and then I would try to sneak over the adult section. And I share that because of evidently at 9, 10, 11 years old, where I was at was I was sneaking over there to find two types of books. One about gay people, and specifically about how I could possibly turn into a little boy. And then the other one was to try to teach myself how to kill myself. Those were the reasons I would, kind of go over there. So that kind of shows you where I was at. I want to, kind of give you a warning if you've not read any of the book or that, it's triggering. It's triggering, but it's very much needed because it covers a lot where people are suffering from alcoholism, child abuse, people that are not sure what path they need to go on as far as their gender. But what I want you to also realize is that at the end of this book, here I am, and there's hope. And that's what I hope to convey to young people who maybe pick this book up, parents who pick this book up for kids who are trying to walk this path, and allies who just want to be able to understand that here's the end result of a rocky path, but here I am. So it took me some time, and I think she's online, but my hero is my sister. Mm-hmm. She is my hero. She is I can't even describe the soul that she had. And I'm nowhere near like her. I mean, I say stuff that's not pleasant. I don't think I've ever come to her. If she has, it's at really heated moments. It's not that bad of a word, but my mouth is trash. We are so different, but so alike. And I want to say that with this family that I have, you would have thought living in Charlottesville, they would have turned against me. But everything I threw at them, they've accepted. And so I'm not going to read the book. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how this book came to be. I had an aunt who lived in Philadelphia, Aunt Josephine, and I used to be really bigger than what I was now. In the book it talks about that I ballooned up to close to 500 pounds before I had gastric bypass. And she used to call me Rewind. Didn't like that, but that was all she did. And so she asked me one time, Rewind, what is it that you want? And she bought this, back then, that was a lot of money. She bought me this Commodore 64 computer with a floppy disk because I told her I wanted to learn how to write. She mailed it from Philadelphia, and I would sit on and write this on that Commodore. And then for some reason, I went away from using the computer and I wrote a lot of stuff by hand, and I drove Margot crazy with scanning stuff that got stuck in the scanner. And I don't know, I remember when I had my top surgery back March of last year, I found this glass notebook that I was supposed to send her, and it was like day 2 after my surgery. So and Amy can attest to the kind of shape I was in, and this was, no, it was a hernia. It was a hernia, and I was like, trying not to take oxycodone and trying just to take Tylenol, and I was crazy out of my mind. And I told Margaret that I found the last little bit of the notebook. Well, it ain't in here because I don't know what I did with it. So that's probably going to be a book 2. It's not in the seat of the recliner. Margot can attest. She saw it. I showed it to her on Zoom, but we have no idea where it is. So, the 2 people that I brought on to speak is Margot, my publisher. So the joke is that she stalked me to find me to write my book. And then the other person was my ex-partner, who is now a very close, probably best friend, is Constance. And in the book, we just took the basic interview that Margot did with her and made it a chapter. And I needed for people to see that, because I wanted people to see that even about 5-6 years sober, I was still a lunatic. I was still crazy. I was still depressed. I was still suicidal because I was not living authentically who I was. And lastly, I'll say before I would like to get Margot and Constance on, is that none of us would happen if I had not found the rooms of Ed. I would not be here. I would not be alive probably if 16 years ago people opened their hearts and many their homes to allow me to come in and be a part. And then it's just the community that I have been able to create, the community of Cville Pride, who I just throw it to them straight and they take it. I just give it to them and they take it and they accept and they try. And so I would love you guys, if you have coins that you want to donate to Cville Pride, because it's been there a while. It's been and it's growing, and it's trying to heal back again from this pandemic. And we need help, and we need people to get boots on ground and volunteer. If you want to be a board member, do so. So that's my plug. I'll get some money later for you guys. Evan, let's bring Margot and Constance on board.
Yes, unmute. Margot, Constance, you want to unmute? Hello?
Hello. Hi, Constance.
Hi, Margot.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Charlie.
Hello, Margot and Constance. Margot, you're still stalking me.
You'll never get away, my friend.
Margot, I would love for you to just kind of talk about the year relationship that we built and why you felt the need, why you felt not even the need, why you felt that I had something to say for a book.
Well, I'll try and keep it brief. I mean, I first heard about Charley. He was recruited by Jude Patton through the network to write a chapter for a series of books called Transgender, which really addresses the issues of aging and end-of-life decision-making in the trans community. And Charley wrote this brilliant chapter, and I had my eye on him ever since then, and then discovered that Charley was coming to a conference that I was attending virtually, of course, because of COVID. And I sat back in the audience, and I really was stalking Charley. He didn't know it at the time, but indeed listened to what he was saying. And by the time he had finished talking, I was convinced and sent him a private chat message saying, you need to be writing your life story. Let's work together on this. And bless his heart, Charley said yes right away. And we've been working together ever since. I'm an anthropologist by training. So my interview with Constance was a little bit out of my comfort zone, because I usually like to spend a lot of time getting to know people, particularly the authors that I work with. And so Charley and I have been talking for an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes a little longer, about once a week since, Charley, correct me, March of last year? I think that's right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's right.
I think so. And what I have done is, recorded those conversations, and they will go into, there's an archive, the Transgender Archive at the University of Victoria here in British Columbia, Canada. And all of the recordings that I've done with Charley will go into the archive, so that scholars in 25 or 30 or 100 years from now will be able to go and retrieve those conversations, because I'm sure there will be other questions that scholars in the future will be asking that probably didn't make it into the book. And as Charley has told you, we spent a lot of time negotiating, what would go in and what would not go in. And I was just delighted that Constance agreed to talk to me, and she is just so articulate and able. I didn't see any point in either Charley or I trying to change what she had to say. And so that's why that part of the book is in an interview format, so you can actually hear the conversation that Constance and I had at that time. And of course, the other parts of the book are mostly things that Charley has either said, in the sense that there are a couple of transcripts of 12-step program presentations that he has made. And other parts of the book are where Charley was writing from the heart. And as he has said, it is triggering in some ways. I'm a pretty tough old bird, but he had me in tears a couple of times. So that's a sort of upfront warning for anybody who's going to pick up the book. But the beauty of it is that, the arc of Charley's story ends up with an extremely happy ending. And I think kudos to you, Charley, for the huge steps you've made forward in your life, and the strength and courage of sharing your story, because I know there are people out there who need to hear it. And thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
Thank you, Margot. I always say to Margot, I don't need to pay a therapist, because I'm just kind of like hanging out with her. She's kind of like that therapist type voice. I mean, I know during my time that I was having the surgery, there were moments that she would say, well, why don't we just get off and you go lay down? And I could hear that soothing voice. But I don't know, Margot and I have we've never met, so virtually we have built this wonderful, wonderful relationship. And I remember, I guess it was May, right, Margot, when you said, "Are we ready to push the button?"
Yep, that's right.
Ready to push the button, and I'm not a roller coaster rider, but I can imagine probably one of the biggest roller coasters in life when you're going down. That's exactly how I felt when she said, "Are you ready to push the button?" Because it made me realize that this was for real. This was for real. So when we talk about bringing Constance in, and I've done it before. I've made amends to her because I was a monster.
Hmm.
I was a straight monster. This woman gave up a lot of her life to come and think that we were going to build a life. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for living with anybody, let alone myself. But the most kindest, loving thing that she did, and I have no clue if she met Carter at this conference or if she saw stuff at this conference, but she sent this packet of information about what it would be like to transition. And you know, the joke is that I woke up that morning, I was living right next door. My sister, and I don't even know if she knows this, but I was living right next door to them. That's what Constance and I tried to build our home. And I was in the process of going to lose this home. And I wasn't making very much money. And so I had to make a decision on whether I was going to pay the light bill or I thought about buying a gun. And I was like, well, you know, if I buy a gun, I don't have to worry about the light bill. And so that's what I did. And we had this mailman that, you know, his joke was, if I put your mail in somebody else's, if somebody else's mail is in your box, take it over to them. That's the way you get to know your neighbor. You know, no, I'm not gonna, you know, don't return it back to me. You know, and so I have no idea why that day he rang the doorbell and handed me this packet. The very moments that I was trying to figure out, you know, I knew I wasn't gonna drink. That was the thing kept going through my head. I was just like, I'm not gonna drink, I'm gonna keep showing them white people in AA that you know, not relapsing, because I know some of them probably put bets on that I was, but I'm not relapsing, but I can kill myself. You know, that's where I was at. And she sent this packet. And it started me realizing that I was, you know, okay to live my life. And so again, Constance, I don't even see your face because I'm behind you. You know, my program of AA teaches me that I need to make amends, and I'll do it so again today. I am so sorry for what I put you through, but I am so grateful that we know what the art of forgiveness is, and we are best of friends. So I'm going to turn it over to Constance, because I'm sure she can tell us a thing or two.
And yes, you have made amends to me many times, and I have accepted many times, and we have become very, very good friends. We are that support for each other all the time, and that's so important. And I was really surprised when Charley told me that he'd like me to speak to Margot, and I just couldn't fathom what I would say to her, and what I would be able to contribute. And so I asked him, I'd say, well, what would I exactly, I don't know, what would I talk to her about? And he said, just talk to her about what it was like living with me. And I said, oh, okay, well, I think I can talk about that. Margot, I was extremely nervous, and Margot called me up and just put me at ease, and we just started to have a conversation. And we just talked, and I was very surprised when I did see the whole book together, that it was in fact the conversation that we had. And she relayed exactly what I said, you know, she put it together in the book. And so I am honored, and I thank you for that, Margot. You did a wonderful job. And I thank you, Charley, for letting me be part of this journey with this book, and seeing this actually come to fruition. We had talked about this some years ago, and it's just wonderful to see it and actually hold it in my hand. I actually bought it online, but I was so excited to just actually hold it in my hand. So I'm just thankful to be part of that, and thank you for including me.
Absolutely. You know, Constance saw something in me before I could see it. I remember we went, I can't remember the year, it might have been 2012, to the Equality Virginia, which is another, I'm a part of that organization. And that is a wonderful organization, Equality Virginia. And I'm on the board. the board chair, Brian, is like my brother. It's like we call each other, brothers from another mother. Brian has a way of, when I'm ready to, like go off like Malcolm X in the Black Panther movement and get ready to put that on social media, he talks to me. Sometimes I listen to him, sometimes I don't. Don't say that. A lot of times he'll talk me down and say, I wouldn't put that out there. But we went to this dinner together. And I remember Constance being in this beautiful red dress, and everybody was just, men and women were just all over her. And at this one, we're not even dating, we're just friends. And they had the outstanding Virginians. They were recognized. And when we were leaving, she said, "You will be one of them one day." And I was like, "No, I don't even have a voice." And she was like, "You're going to be one of those outstanding Virginians." And that has happened. So one of my favorite chapters, too, is of course that interview with Constance, because it really, and I have to read it several times sometimes because it reminds me of where I was and where I don't want to go again. But chapter 17 it tells about speaking at this virtual engagement to some medical students, and one of them asked if I had any regrets in life, and so I talked about it in the book. I talked about I regret that I don't, haven't found again the love of my life, and I regret that I didn't get sober earlier, and I regret that I didn't finish my degree, and I regretted that I didn't. I regretted that I didn't finish the degree. And the fourth one was that I didn't. Remember now, so it was the degree, love of life. Oh, shit. Shows y'all, it's Margot, that shows you I've really read the book, right? Yeah, I've yet to fall in love again. I've never finished school. I had gotten sober earlier, and I had transitioned early in life. And they typed back and they said, "Well, you could probably get 2 of those." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Oh, I'm sure you'll find someone to love. And I'm sure that you could go back to school." And then she said, "Oh, and by the way, just so to tell you, Morehouse is now online. And also to let you know, Morehouse is now taking trans." And so I thought about it for about 2 months. And I was thoroughly convinced that I couldn't learn in school. I didn't think I could. I didn't think I had what it takes to be a college student. I mean, the only reason I went to Piedmont was because my father was old, and you could get Social Security benefits, and I had money to buy pot and drugs and alcohol with, because if I stayed in school till I was 23 or 24 years old, I got this check. So that was the only reason. And I think I had a 2 point something. It was 2 point something when I got the transcript, and it was even more. The high school was even worse. And so I remember I applied, and this young lady named Jolisa called me from Morehouse, and she said, "Mr. Burton, can I be honest with you?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "These are some pretty bad transcripts." So I said, "Oh, so you guys aren't going to take me?" And she was like, "Well, I don't know what I can do, but do you think maybe you could write an essay?" And I was like, "Sister, can I write?" I sure can. And so I just, again, was just honest with why, my grades and why I felt like I could be a Morehouse man. And I got accepted. And so I just finished my first semester, and I have a 4.0 average. There were nights when I was just like, I can't do this. I can't read hundreds of pages, go to work, do all the stuff that I'm doing. I just can't do this. Some kind of way I just sludged through it. And through the course of that being on virtually, I've made so many friends of Black men that make me feel now more comfortable as a Black man. Not just a trans man, but a Black man. And And I gained enough respect that they voted me Poorhouse Fan of the Month back in March. My sister and I were talking the other night, and we were like, are we truly happy in life, or we just kind of move through it? I would have to say, I was thinking about that when I was driving in. And I would have to say, I am so damn happy. I am so content with where I am. I'm content because I have a program of sobriety. I'm content that I have a power greater than me that I choose to call God. I have this program that I can take steps when my life is crazy and apply them to almost anything that I do. I did that when I started out with this book. I can say no and still be happy by saying it. And I damn sure do make a difference. You know, I make a difference. There's a young man that I'm hoping that he's out on Zoom. He just had his top surgery on Monday, named Steve. Stevie, something about that kid. I met him through the PFLAG support group. You know, something about that kid. And I looked and I said, you know what? He's going to do the same thing with me. He's going to do this. He's going to make a difference for someone. And that's what I tell these young guys that I work with. I tell them, you know what? If you feel like you want to make a difference, make a difference. It's not going to happen overnight. But just dream big. Just dream big. I mean, in my book, I talk about, you know, I'm going to keep writing because I'm going to write my book. You know, people are placed in our lives at the time they did. Unfortunately, my uncle was placed in my life at a time that he did, and I did what happened. It made me stronger behind it. You know, Margot was placed in my life. Constance was placed in my life. And damn sure 16 years ago, people in the rooms that Ed was placed in my life. I have the sponsor I had with 16 years. I tell you, the number. She has my number. She has my number. And you know, I got so at some point I was like, I need to find a man. And so I got another guy that saw me from day one, Frank, and I was like, geez, this is like another version. I was just like, but these are people who never said no. And so I think I'm just going to kind of turn it over for questions, and you can go back and forth with the Zoom. But I want to thank every last one of you for coming out. Or you know, we're still in this crazy kind of pandemic thing, and for you to come out tonight means so much for me. So thank you.
Sure. Don't see any questions, so let's just kind of bounce back and forth. We'll see as they come in over Zoom. Is there anybody else here?
Amy.
Hey, Charlie.
Just project this later.
Oh, okay. Hi, Charlie. My name is Amy. That was awesome. I loved hearing it. So I was just curious, when you first got a copy of the book, like how far in advance until it actually came out, and when you got it, did you get it in the mail? And when you opened it, like, what did you feel? Tell us about that.
So Margot was in Canada, so I had to wait for her to send my copies of the book, and so I went ahead on Amazon. And I was like, I'm going to buy the book. It's almost, you know, that egotistical thing. I was like, I'm going to leave it like 5 stars and just talk about it. But then I realized that your name gets tagged to it. No, but when the book came, I was so scared to open it because I was like, I know what the first 3 chapters are about. And when Margot and I talked about this, about the triggering, you know, because God knows, Margot, I had to read this thing over, 10 times? I mean, she kept sending different things and we'd have to read it. And you know, so I had already read it electronically, but to open the book and see this picture. This is the picture that my sister took of me, and I have no idea how old I was in this book. And you know, and that's me. You know, these nasty, dirty sneakers. You know, they couldn't keep me clean because I was always outside. You know, I remember when my sister got married, I think, she could correct me, I think they had the bridesmaids kind of like lasso me down so I wouldn't go outside. And all this frilly ass dress that I hated. You know. It made me realize that my life was going to go in a different direction. And that I had something to say that hopefully was going to help me. So it took me 3 days to really start reading it again and open it back up. But it's sad. I think when they came, I've had so many damn surgeries this last 2 years. I'm like a pandemic surgery buddy or something. But I just think I was at home when they came, and it was the feel, you know, the feel of the book. Margot and I had a different color cover at first, and then we changed this color cover, and it's just me. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Thanks.
So, Charlie, I used to work at UVA and I used to do gender change operations, and I had a patient who was transitioning to be a man, and he said he always felt trapped in the wrong body. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, you know, I hear people when I hear different people in the trans community talk about their dead name, that you know, that's not me. Charlotte lived for 50 years as best as Charlotte could. And then, you know, in 2006, Charlotte found some life in a program called Alcoholics Anonymous and lived okay. But there was still this, as my sister and I was talking, there was still so much of this level of unhappiness. I remember in our home, Constance and I had created a beautiful home, and I remember we were in the bedroom. We had a huge bedroom because we had knocked one wall down, and 2 beds, made 1 bedroom. I think, and Constance might be able to correct me, I think, sorry to point, I was coming out of the closet, and she said, you look so unhappy. You look miserable, I believe is the word that she used. And I screamed at her and I said, I am. You know, and I was miserable because it was almost like, story, The Boy Beneath My Skin, was almost like I wanted to take razor blades and just strip the skin off, and hopefully it would emerge to something different than what I was. And this was how I was sitting in the rooms of AA feeling. And this was how I was trying to maneuver in life. And so Constance came from Chesapeake, and I would drive down, and it was the first time ever in my life. She was highly, you know, very involved as a moderator for the MCC church. And this was the first time I was seeing gay people worshiping God. And I remember it was this guy, and Constance said that he was transitioning. And I kept watching this guy, and I was like, am I watching this guy? I'm not watching this guy because I'm like this sexual attraction or anything, but what is it? The reason why this guy just stays under my skin? And I'm like, look at Tracy coming in, staying under my skin. So, because I wanted to be like him. And it was funny because I could go to Chesapeake and I could be with Constance and be as manly as whatever I wanted to. And then when I got closer back to Charlottesville, I was going to have to be something a little bit different. And it wasn't that people were expecting that. It was that was what I was saying in my head. You know, I was trapped. I was trapped, but I didn't hate Charlotte. I just couldn't be Charlotte. That's the way it is for me with my transition. I'll be honest with you, I had some hellified good times when I was up there. I mean, I can remember 20 some years ago, and I got my cousin Debbie's on the Zoom, and we got tests. We were saying, shit, at 90, we will be sitting in a rocking chair, smoking pot and drinking bourbon, but when I graduated from bourbon to moonshine is my choice of drink, that was a problem. So, I wasn't trapped. I just wasn't me.
Charlie, can I interject here?
Sure.
A couple of comments from Zoom. Love you, Charlie. So proud of you. Love you, Charlie.
I paid those for.
Love watching you educate and inspire others about the community. We also got one from our good friend Gary, who's out there in Zoom. Great job, Charlie. This is Gary. Thank you for sharing your story to help other members of the community.
Hey, Gary.
Can you tell us more about how you reached the milestone of deciding to transition, and what was the most surprising part of that journey?
So when I say I didn't have a voice, I mean, I couldn't put feelings to words on what I was feeling with this whole transition. I just knew I wasn't a lesbian. And I just knew I wasn't. I like hanging around with guys, but I want to learn how to dress. I mean, like Brian, I want to wear socks like he wears and Cole Haan shoes, and I want to be cool like him. I mean, this is the reason I was attracted to guys. It wasn't that, but I finally realized that I really needed to go to therapy because I was really crazy. And when I say really crazy, trust me, there are some people in this room who are in the program that can attest I was really crazy. And so I started going back to therapy at this place called a Family Stress Clinic at UVA. And if I could find her today, I really hope I can and send her a book. My therapist, her name was Jen Layton. And so I remember one day I said to Jen, I said, I got to go home and write some stuff. I got to write because I can't put this into work. I can't tell you what it is that I don't know. So I went home that weekend and I just started writing and writing and writing. And for me, I couldn't use the computer. I had to just grip that pen into that paper. Sometimes I would be writing so hard, I would tear the paper and I'd have to start writing all over again. And I wrote in this notebook and I gave it to him. And I left it. I went up to the Family Stress Clinic was in the primary care center at that particular point. And so I dropped it off at the desk like on Monday. And I guess it was so bad, I wasn't supposed to sit on until Thursday, and Jen called and said, you need to come in today. Mission number 85, probably. I'm probably up on the 5th floor. And so she said, I don't have a clue on how to help you about this trans thing. This is how behind we are at UVA right now about transgender services. I don't have a clue on it, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. We're going to figure this thing out together. And so I had a nurse practitioner. Many of you have seen the video that I did with UVA where they tracked me for about 3 months. Reagan Thompson was my lifeline. Reagan saw me from bad to good to worse to where I am now. And we started just trying to find, and we couldn't find very few trans services in Charleston. So I would get in the car and I would drive to Richmond. And it was one day my drive to Richmond, Gary, that I realized that I was driving right down. And the crazy part is, for a while, that Confederate flag used to be, but it wasn't there at that particular point. And I'm going that evening, and it's about 7 o'clock in the evening because the meeting was, like 8, I believe. And I said, you know what, God, if I'm doing the right thing, you think you might be able to show me something? No, and I just saw the sun. I saw the sun peeking through, and I was like, still ungrateful. What else are you gonna show me? That's the sun. The sun's been out all day. I mean, what else are you gonna show me? And he didn't show me anything else. So I guess he said, asshole, I've already showed you all I want to show you. And I remember I walked in and they looked like little Doogie Howser 12-year-old boys. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. Here I am, 50 some years old. And they over here and they're talking about the latest game on something. And I could barely play Pac-Man on Nintendo. I have nothing in common with them. And then I realized that was exactly how I felt when I walked in there. I have nothing in common with these people. So let me just shut up and get out of my head and listen. And when I walked out, it was called the Fad Free Clinic, it's now called Health Brigade. When I walked out, it was almost like in the big book, Bill Wilson talks about fourth dimension. When I walked out of that office, I felt like I had arrived. I felt like I was walking on air. People used to talk about that when we would take, people in the room would understand this one. We would take meetings to the jails. And it would say, when I came out after just having that invigorating, knowing that there are people in there that really want to hear what I have to say, I feel like I'm just walking on air because I feel like not that I've helped them, but they helped me. And that's exactly what those young guys did. And that's when I realized I'm all in. I'm all in. And then it was, what am I going to name myself? Now I got to pick a name. So here's the crazy thing. I have a brother that's named Charles, but my father was named Charlie, and his name was Charlie. When I was a little kid in elementary school, my parents were the janitors at Red Hill School, and there was this principal named Mr. Kendrick, and he used to call me Mr. Charlie, little Mr. Charlie. He said, because you are just like your dad. And I'm telling you, if I could find that man, I would tell him. That was one of the thoughts that came through my head was, be just like my daddy. But unfortunately, my attitude and my personality is like my mother. My father was very calm, like my brother and sister, and I'm like that fiery one, like my mom. But I have to smile. I have to smile, and so I live through my father now by watching my brother. And in the end of my acknowledgement, I talk about how here's this Vietnam vet, that macho guy, ex-cop, ex-military, and he gets the pronouns most of the time. Now, when I call and ask my sister, he'll always say, hang on, honey. But, I'm like, that's okay. I can be your honey. But it's just by having that acceptance, both from my family, my recovery community, and my friends, made it even easier for me to know that I was making the right decision.
This is a two-parter for you. I want to know what it was like for Constance to read your book, and I want to know, were you nervous when she got a copy? Were there things that you knew you had written about, but you weren't quite sure if she knew? You're like, look, we've made all these amends, but I don't know if I'm ready to share that part. Strangers, sure.
Right.
But Constance, were you nervous at all for her to read it?
I wasn't nervous for her to read it. The person that I was nervous for to read it was my sister. Not that I was bringing out any deep, dark secrets of the family, but that, and this is what she said. She said, I have not been able to read this. So I said, well, this is my sister. So I said, well, why don't you just read the acknowledgement? She said, well, that made me cry. I'm like, it's like, just put it on your, just put it on, it's a nice coffee table. And I worried about her because I worried that she was going to feel exactly what she felt, you know, and sometimes we, you know, for Constance, we have been so honest with each other, and again, that is, I am so grateful, and I keep doing this, and I keep beating this like a broken, you know, record, is that AA has taught me how to be honest. I have to be brutally honest. And so I knew when Margot said, I'm pushing the button, you know, I knew, okay, well, here comes all this brutally honest stuff, but you know what? Let it go. And I was worried that Constance didn't want her stuff publicly. And I think, Constance, correct me if I'm wrong, I asked you a couple of times if you were okay with that.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that was my only worry. But I've had several people tell me that that chapter is the strongest chapter in the book because it really showed a side of someone who was sober and who was, you know, I was probably trying to walk the walk and talk the talk around in different circles, but getting in this house, here's this monster, you know, and eventually she just couldn't play that part anymore of going out in public like this little perfect couple, and then, you know, you come back home and you're throwing stuff across the room and you're, you know, deep down in the bed and can't get out for days at a time. That I worried about what it was going to do for her and her friends, but she said she was okay with it. Jenny.
I have to say that I was so, first of all, I was so impressed when I got to that point. I was so surprised. And ultimately, I was partially horrified by some of the stuff and then really moved by it. And I just thought it was so courageous of you to let, you know, you're telling your story. It's easy to tell your story from your point of view, good, bad, et cetera, but to let somebody else, even though there's a trust there, or whatever, but to let somebody else tell the story of what you were like or did or whatever, it just was incredible. I don't think I've ever seen that in a memoir or.
I think Margot and I talked about it in depth, and I think one of the things that I said to Margot was that people need to see this. People need to read this and see that you know, the LGBTQ community does go through, you know, we're not all rainbows and ha ha ha. We do have domestic abuse within our relationships. And whereas it never got physical, when was it going to get there? And that's when Constance packed up the U-Haul and said, I can't do this because I'm not going to get it to the point where it was going to get physical. But what I realized is that the verbal abuse, every time I threw that stuff out there, was just like a slap against the skin. And me being able to open up that day and open up that book and finally get to that chapter and read and realize that I am no longer that person, you know, and what am I going to do when I do get in a relationship? What are going to be some of the things that I can tell you? I done sent about 6 or 7 skirting out the door because I'm like, nope. I recognize toxic behavior now, and I've seen it in me, and I'm seeing it in you, and so I'm not going to accept that. Nice seeing you, putting you on block. Yep, won't see me again. Have a great life. And so in order to be able to do that, I see that that's growth in me, because I don't want to be toxic in something toxic, because then all that's going to do is just, as a friend of mine used to say in AA, water seeps to its own level. So being able to read that, being able to work with therapy and get to a point of being comfortable in my own skin, you know, yeah, I just felt like Constance she had to have a word.
So we've got a couple comments. Let's see here.
We love you. So proud of you, Charlie. Got him what we say. There was a question in here somewhere. Yes, here we are. Hello, Charlie. What would you say to yourself as a child about being happy at the age you are today?
Wow. I would say that hey, little girl, you made it. You know, through some horrific stuff. I used to say that I blame myself because I should have said more. I said all I could say. And if I could be where I am now and be a kid, that's why it's so important that I work with P-Flag, because there are 7- and 8-year-old little boys that are coming in there. And there used to be a point several years ago I would be envious and say, I wish that was. But now I watch them live, and I'm able to see myself with them. And we have not, so, you know, of course I wasn't a boy, so my brother was the only boy in the family biologically, and so but I still think I'm more manly, and I'm not afraid of mice and stuff. Well, okay, my brother might has come over and get him killed before me. So. My great niece Tamari had a little boy, and I am watching him, and I am always asking, what is he doing? You know, and so she has 2 kids, and I'll talk about the other child, but I watched this little boy, and he's probably exactly the way I would have been as a boy. Cars, trucks, you know, I mean, they used to buy me Barbie dolls, and I just cut the hair off, so they never had hair. And so I watch him, and I watch his mannerisms, and I watch his movement, and I think that would have been me. Right? You know, and then she has this beautiful little girl who came into this world fighting for her life, and she's named after my mother. And she looks like my mother, and God knows, I think she's going to have that personality like me. But I'm able to watch children and see how happy, and hope that their life continues to be happy and be free and just be themselves. And I watched that in this little boy, and I love every minute of watching. So I don't want any child to have to go through what I'm going through. Yeah.
Another question off the Zoom. Sure. Can you tell us about how you will continue to support the Black trans men in our community through your organization?
So back in April, I had been with Black trans men for 10 years. 1 year as their national program director. And I started realizing that I wasn't helping Black trans guys in my backyard. You know, I'm on Cville Pride, I'm on P-Flag, but a lot of what I'm doing is national. And I'm still, Carter will still allow me to do stuff, but I wanted to get boots on ground and help young Black trans men. So I've created an organization called Black Trans Men Can Cook. And so basically what it was is that we had Equality Virginia had their TIES conference, which is called the Trans Informational Empowerment Summit. And we had it virtually last year. And they had a people of color roundtable. And they had this platform set up that you could go off and get into a waiting room and talk. And so it was a bunch of us talking. So I posed a question. I said, what brings you together? And we're like, food. And I was like, how many of y'all know how to cook? And I'm like, not many of us. And so I've been blessed. I've been blessed by my mother with her cooking skills. And I'm a pretty damn good cook. I'm a baker. And so I said, well, what would it be like if we just started meeting, together on the first Sunday every month, and I'll see if we can't get Midpoint Richmond. And what would it be like if we just start meeting and we just talk about food? And so me, my mind is always rolling, and so I'm thinking, okay, we don't need to stop right there with us being food. We meet virtually. I go to other groups, but basically, I'm going to take this group and create this group. I got a grant. I'm going to create this group, and that we're going to make the first Black trans men's cookbook. And so we're going to. A lot of these kids were raised by their grandmas, so they have some grandma cookbooks, some recipes, and we're going to teach each other how to cook. And we have hopefully we have a event coming up in July where a restaurant is going to allow us to come in. They're going to teach us how to make homemade pizza. And so we're going to do this kind of stuff together. And so for Black people, food was a staple of our lives. We at church, you congregated at least 1 month out of the Sunday that was eating. And, Black mothers, that's how they communicated, was through cooking and food. And my mother really, we made a cookbook for her, and I don't think half of it's right because she was in her, her stuff wasn't written down. Her stuff was in her head. You throw a little bit here, you throw a little bit there. And so we're going to create this. I want to create this atmosphere where we just kind of feel together and we feel safe. It's not hard being young, Black, and a trans man living in this world right now. And they need to see someone who has faith, and again, AA teaches me I can't keep this. I have to give it away. And so I have to give back to these guys. It's important to me. And I want to tell a quick story. She's here now. So when the whole George Floyd thing went down, I was so angry. And where did my mind go? I'm going to AA no more. I ain't not going to AA. I'm not going up in there. We had tried to create this diversity and recovery off of a young lady saying that people had said some things to her. I was in Richmond, and I'm coming back, and the phone rings, and this friend of mine is on the phone. And what she said was, can I have 10 minutes of your time? Which ended up, I had to pull off 64, and we talked for an hour and a half. And all she said to me was, I'm not going to try to convince you to go to AA or not. Everything's moving to Zoom. I've got a meeting I just created called Sober AF. You want to hit it tonight? Come on. And so I went. And I started bringing other trans guys into the space because she reached her hand out because she knew I was hurting from whatever way that she knew. And I started mentoring and sponsoring some trans guys. And who am I to tell them how to live sober if I'm not living sober and going to meetings myself? And I share that because that's how we roll, and that's how I roll with helping. I can't keep, there are sometimes I'm exhausted. I've worked all day. I work for a wonderful nonprofit organization called WorkSource, and I have 17 people that are just like my family. These are people who normally would not mix in the working world, but we all just kind of hang out up there at FEI on that hill and we have fun. And I had been mentally exhausted all day, and that phone will ring, and it would be one of these guys asking for a question, and I'm like, I can't answer this. But I pick up that phone and answer, because there really wasn't anybody there to answer for me when I transitioned. So if I'm here and have some answers, I need to give them. It's just important for me to know.
Charlie, can we take one more question from the room?
Sure.
Final question.
Okay. How do you think the intersection of being Black and trans, like how do you feel like that shaped your trans journey?
When I go out in public, they don't see trans first, they see a Black man. And so I have to teach the world that I'm not a scary person because of the color of my skin, because you're seeing that I'm a man. My trans is just added pudding to the cake. And I'm not by any means, we in trans where we call it stealth, which is that a lot of trans guys will transition and then they don't want anybody to know that they're trans, they live a life. And so I'm by no means stealth, but I also see that there are times that I just need to be just, you see me as a Black man. And I used to, when I would speak to medical students, I would just be dropping, I would be dropping that, and when I was doing AA speaking, I would just be dropping that F-bomb every 5 minutes. Somebody in this room at one of the meetings said, you might be able to get your point across a little better if you stop dropping the F-bombs. I thought about that. And so then I was dropping it at a medical panel, and I think she's probably on the call, said, might be able to hear you a little bit better if you stop dropping it. And it has made a huge difference for me by hearing that and being teachable, because, and I'll tell you what really made the difference for me. Morehouse College has made the difference in how I see myself as a man. That first semester has shaped me into being a man of integrity, being a man of my worth. I am more at ease with who I am. I don't know what it did, but that semester with all those men has really changed the course on how I look at myself as a Black man. And I want every young Black trans man to experience that. I don't know what the secret ingredient to it was. I don't know if the prestige of being at Morehouse, I don't know what it is, but it has definitely shaped me into being a different person.
Thank you for this wonderful hour. Other comments? Do we have time for another question?
Sure. Hey, this is your building.
Remember,
You know, much fuss in here, we'll go all night long.
go all night, it doesn't matter. Yep.
I can't remember, I know it's somewhere in late spring, but obviously, I guess, ever since Greg Abbott signed that order, I think in Texas, I've been about 4, but that's a different thing. I gave you, I guess, I think about the Greg Abbott, the government signed it. Again, I guess you take it for granted, so I only know something about it. How, I guess for students, trans students, you can't really be by the preferred name that you do believe that for teachers, you believe that you trans kind of have to report to parents. Obviously, not all parents support that children danger. Luckily, the vote agenda does have this trans bill, state government, usually most of them. think put on hold the shop like the numbers. Our politics are not, I don't think with minority. On the state level. It's a similar situation.
Yeah, so I was appointed by Governor Northam on a very newly formed LGBTQ advisory board. And I can publicly say we're in disarray right now, the whole board. There are people on the board under the LGBTQ rainbow that are a threat to us. We're sitting on this board and we don't know who to trust. And so I say that because we were semi-okay those first few meetings under Governor Northam. And then Youngkin came. And there was fear straight off the bat before we even laid eyes on it. And we allowed that fear to infiltrate into this board, and now we're just all over the place. He has appointed someone to our board that has put a lot of hate through Instagram and social media. And I'm assuming he's a log cabin Republican, I guess is what he is. And he's going to be coming to this board. And for the state of Virginia, for the LGBTQ community, this is some scary times. Okay, so just look at what we just went through last week, Roe versus Wade. What's next is marriage equality. And then next they're coming after trans. And, you know, at first I thought about stepping off the board, and I've been told that they don't want me on that board. But guess what? They appointed Charley for 4 years. I got 3 more to go. And Charley's going home. That's the kind of stuff that we have to do. And again, I have to thank my brother from another mother, Brian, because I was ready to run, and of course that cool, solid voice said, you know what, we might be able to do more damage to sitting, you know. And so it's important in the next few months that we get people in our community to vote. Because here's the realization that I've come at, is that we need to thank these little white Karens who started running on the train with Trump, that we've now been taking Roe versus Wade. Okay, so now we need to thank these people who thought Mr. Trump was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we need to get out into the street, and we need to get our community to vote. We can't, you know, I mean, I've heard so many people in my African-American community that didn't want to vote because they didn't like Kamala Harris. Hell, I don't like her either, but she's our vice president. You know, she ain't my favorite person, but you know, we have to do something to get, we have to do something to get our LGBTQ community back voting and back interested in politics. And I have to get my Black community back out here and back voting again. We've got to vote the way we voted back at, what was it, whenever Obama was President Obama. We need to have those lines wrapped around places again. And saying, here I go, I get real worked up about this political stuff, but and it makes me angry because don't come talk to me if you haven't voted. You know, and so it's important. And so what do I need to do? I need to put my money where my mouth is. I need to shut up and stay on that, not shut up, but stay on that board and be a menace to them, you know, and do what I need to do. And I need to work with my organizations like Cville Pride, and we get things done. And I work with organizations like Equality Virginia so that we get more people out who haven't voted. We start getting them to vote. this is the only way that we're gonna get stuff overturned. I'm so happy to see today that Supreme Court Justice is gonna retire. So that opens the door for I forget her name, to be able to come in. This is the kind of stuff we gotta do. We gotta follow politics. As boring as it is, we gotta follow it so we know what we're doing, because it's our lives.
A politician said the decisions are made by those in the room at the time. So you're right to stay in the room. If you're not in the room, you can't help make the decision.
Right.
You gotta get out there.
Right.
We have to.
So we've covered voting, we've covered drinking, we've covered, we had them reciting the alphabet the way the police do it. I think we've got, Ann?
I feel like we should end with the serenity prayer.
Like we're in an AA.
And then fight on.
We buy some books.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charlie.
Thank you.
You're interested in purchasing books?
We've got to figure it out again, Evan.